G'day everyone, Joel Wild here from Peasy. Just thought we'd start something a little bit different. Those that I've been chatting to recently know that we have really been getting into our property, something that's a big passion of mine, and something that our team are super keen on understanding more as well. And I think the whole country's been sort of captivated by what's been happening over the last sort of 24 months. In fact, if you go back, the last 7 years, we've seen a boom, a drop, a boom, a little drop, and then followed by a boom again. And so, you don't need decades of experience to kind of see what happens, how the market is affected, what affects the market. And so what we want to do is just put a spotlight on a few suburbs, a few random suburbs that we're going to pick. Now, the idea is there's thousands of suburbs in Australia, obviously. It's going to be impossible to cover them all. We want to do this once every quarter. But the key really is not necessarily to show you a suburb in particular. It's not to say that this suburb is the best one to buy in or the worst one to buy in. It's more just to give you a bit of insight into how to research a suburb. So if you're actually looking at buying in a particular area, why should you buy there? What indicators should you be looking out for when you are actually researching where you want to buy? So hopefully this does give you a bit of insight. We're going to be looking at all different types of properties, suburbs, affordable suburbs, not so affordable, ones that have had really good growth recently, ones that have been plateaued for a while, which obviously out there's not many at the moment. But we thought we'd start with Blackett. Now, I suppose the question, why Blackett? Well, Blackett's one of the very few affordable suburbs left. You can still get a property there for 700,000. A house, probably a 3-bedroom house. It's in actually a really good location in terms of logistically speaking. I mean, just have a look at the map. It takes you 47 minutes to get to Blackett, going down the M2, M4, the M4 and M5. Yes, it's an expensive trip, but that's pretty quick. If I am looking at this map, in the afternoon, so obviously that will get a little bit longer. Compare that to Bankstown, which is much closer, 22 k's away versus 45 k's or 50 k's, and it takes almost the same time, 46 minutes. So it is depending on the route you take, obviously. So it is actually a good location. It's not far from Penrith. There's a lot going on there. Huge development going on in Mount Druitt. It's close to Blacktown. There's a lot going on, and the centre of Sydney is moving further out, so it's a good area. But I'll dive into that a little bit deeper and go through some stats with you. So it's 38 kilometres away from the Sydney CBD. Anyone that's bought a lot of people that are buying property recently are not finding that as important to be near a CBD, given a lot of people can work from home. My personal opinion, I don't think that is going to be as hot as it is, i.e. buying regionally. I don't think it's going to be as hot as it has been over the last couple of years. I personally think we've seen as much growth as we're going to. I think living regionally will suit some people. Some people will find it, that the amenities are not as good. So I think still being within close to a CBD, I think is important. It's part of Blacktown LGA, which has had a lot of growth, and it's in the Mount Druitt precinct. So the median house price there, 732K. That's probably gone up a little bit. These usually are a few months old. But yes, we've seen a few properties that have sold for around that. Median rent of 330. Once again, we've seen some pretty good rental figures. Vacancy is dropping significantly there. And so we think that that's going to increase as well. Average days on market is 33. That's definitely longer than a lot of other parts of Sydney, especially. You're probably looking at less than 20 days, but that is starting to drift out now, just with the fear of interest rates rising and regulators stepping in to try to control what people are borrowing. Gross yield of 3.1%. That's pretty good. Auction clearance rate of 74%. Last weekend, it was about 71% total in Sydney, so that's quite good. And the vacancy rate is 0.08%. That is ridiculously low. That shows that the suburb is in demand. for renters. And what happens if it's in demand for renters? It tends to then start resulting in demand for people wanting to buy as well. And that could be investors seeing, if median rent is going up, investors may see it as a good place to invest. Or owner occupiers that maybe see it as a place. If the population's growing in a particular area, it's not just renters moving to the area. So, or generally speaking, anyway. So talking about the vacancy rates before. So it's dropped significantly over the last sort of 12 months, and up from a high of about 2.4%. 2.4 is reasonably high. But and I say reasonably high. That's probably pretty standard for a lot of parts of Sydney. So to think that it's got down to 0.8% is you can see property prices actually. If you look at this graph in reverse, you can actually see property prices will follow that in the opposite direction. So property prices go up as vacancy rates go down. Once again, it's not a general rule, but if a place is in demand for renters, it's probably in demand for purchasers as well. So at the moment, population is 3,500, average age of 30. So, the fact that they're younger, capacity for earnings you'd expect to be a bit higher than others. There is some gentrification happening. Those that know Blacktown know that can have some issues with crime and things like that, but that does naturally start to gentrify over time as the government's starting to sell off more commission housing there. But you can see the owners versus renters, 48% to 52%, which more renters than owners, usually not the greatest sign for an area that could grow, but that is starting to drop. We're just waiting on the census results come through June next year for the census we just did. So this may update, but if you compare that somewhere like the CBD or Bondi, it's actually less owners in those areas. Singles a lot more than family as well. But it is more families are moving to the area, which generally will push the price up. In terms of the household structure, so there's more couples with children than childless couples, and many more single parents. So that does obviously weigh in terms of affordability of rental or people wanting to buy. If there's two incomes, obviously it's going to be a lot easier to purchase than with one. But that's current occupancy. I mean, this is probably about 5 years old, this information. So, there definitely are families moving to the area. Household income. So, you can see that it's pretty sort of spread between sort of the 15 to 33 and then up to the 130 mark. Once again, 5 years old, 5-year-old data. We'll have more data next year. But you probably ideally want to see household income more towards the 52 to sort of 130 mark. When you're talking about borrowing capacity and people being able to afford more. But once again, sound like a broken record. These are the households that currently exist. So it doesn't count for people that are moving or looking to move into the area. This is a key stat. So population growth is what causes demand. So you want the population to be growing in a particular area. There's not a lot of development out there. So it's an area that's getting population growth, but there's not necessarily the housing to suit. So that creates demand. But they're expecting that Blacktown LGA is going to grow by at least 50%. That's massive. So if you want to get into Blacktown itself, you're probably paying $1 million for a property. So to be able to get something for $650,000, $750,000, even $800,000 for a good house is pretty good value. If you're looking at investing, and this is obviously all Sydney based. There's obviously good pockets in other states as well, but in Sydney itself, it's definitely an affordable area. And if there is growth in population like they're expecting, you can expect property prices will grow with it. So in terms of the demand, it is a high demand market, but it has been getting less demand than the rest of New South Wales. And interestingly, with the vacancy rate so low, this demand it's still high. It's still a high amount of people visiting properties. So still a good sign that there could be some growth yet to come. Um, Market trends. So in terms of median sale prices. You can see starting from August, which August 2020 is probably, we were obviously in the midst of COVID, but yeah, the growth in the area has sort of been more tail-ended towards July. It so that might mean it's a little bit late to the party, so it's probably still got a bit of a tail to come in terms of growth. One thing that I always say though, when it comes to growth, you've got to think that for an area to grow, people need to pay more for a property. So to pay more for a property, you need to have borrowing power or cash to be able to pay more for a property. So it's not just about demand; it's also about who can actually afford to move into the area. But given how unaffordable all the rest of Sydney's gone, and seeing that there is gentrification happening in the area. There's some really good developments. There's the airport in Badgerys Creek. So there's a lot of stuff going on that would mean that people might see it as a bit more of an appealing place to move to, especially in terms of employment. So it's saying that the supply to demand ratio is good. So it's just saying that it's not it's not ridiculous demand in the area. And it's quite interesting the way that human emotions work. When the market's going crazy, the phone rings off the hook. Everybody wants to get involved, and they're quite. People are generally quite happy to pay 10% more than they would have paid 6 months ago, just because the market is going nuts. But when the market starts to get a little bit cooler, people start to get a little bit more tentative, and those are the times when people buy. When people are tentative. And the smart investors buy, and everybody says that they're lucky. They're not lucky. They just bought when nobody else was buying. So if you can buy in a market, and within reason, of course, there's some markets that are not in demand just simply because they're terrible markets to buy. But I think if you can be within less than an hour from the CBD, pretty close to Blacktown and all those sorts of things, and have reasonable demand, then I think there's an opportunity there to buy. In terms of the just looking at the suburb analyzer, so it's rating at 62 out of 100. And that's just talking about demand and effectively how much of a discount you might be able to get on a property based on who you're competing with and things like that. So it's a reasonable market there for buyers at the moment. The LGA of Blacktown itself, just a little bit of information there. So it's Blackett's pretty close to being right in the middle there, but it covers areas like Schofields, the Ponds, Acacia Gardens, Quakers Hill. Those areas on that sort of fringe have had considerable growth. And Blackett's only, if you only have to look like a couple of suburbs over, you're paying more than $1 million for a house. So, what tends to happen is that people that want to move to a particular area but can't quite afford it, they'll go to the next suburb over, and it's actually happening on the other side as well. So, and I'll show you a heat map a little bit later, and you can sort of see what's happening in terms of growth across Sydney. So this is all really interesting stuff. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and it's saying that they're expecting to grow to 500,000 people in 10 years. That's enormous. And now that's Blacktown City, so that's, like I said, that does cover a lot of other suburbs, which are this development happening there, which is obviously going to increase housing in those areas, but given Blackett falls into that area, that's obviously worth considering. Yeah, it's no longer considered the fringe. It's almost in the middle. If you talk, you go as far west now. You've got like as Penrith, for example, as far south as sort of Campbelltown, going north. It's sort of right in the centre, and the transport is unreal. It's to get out there in less than an hour, and you've got motorways going everywhere there, and you can bypass the city if you want to go north or south as well. So, which is pretty handy. These are the fit for precincts. So they sort of each have their own developments and plans going on. There's a lot going on in Mount Druitt in particular, which I'll show you in a second. So in terms of Mount Druitt itself, plenty of work, lots of homes. It's very, very residential area, lots of education, training, all the ingredients that you need to make a good sort of rounded suburb. And they're also doing a renewal of the an expansion of the TAFE there as well. It's going to create a lot more jobs. And I'll show you more about that, the other stuff that they're doing a little bit later. So they used to do a lot more industrial than what they do now, but I suppose it's starting to diversify a little bit into different types of employment, and the work from home thing means that people can live anywhere really, sometimes anywhere in the country. So there's a bit more attraction for these affordable suburbs, and that's a big reason why Blackett's had fairly substantial growth just in the last sort of 6 months or so, which is quite interesting. So yes, and one of the big developments in Blacktown itself was the expansion of the hospital, and also opening the university campus there as well. So in terms of the employment growth, so this is quite significant because a lot of people would see places like Blackett, Bidwell, Tregear, Lethbridge Park as generally more sort of welfare or Centrelink focused, but the number of employed residents is growing significantly, and it's growing by more than the population is growing. So it means that more people are finding work there, or the people who traditionally are not working are starting to move elsewhere as those commission housing, as the commission housing is being sold off. So this is a really good sign for the growth of a city. So in terms of income growth, there has been income growth in the area in general. Like I said, we're waiting on the updated census results, which will come out next year. Everyone will have access to those. If you look on SQM research, you can find all the data there as well, which is really quite handy. But yes, basically highlighting what I was saying before, given that it's an affordable area to buy, it's going to attract a lot more people, especially given that there's a lot more work out there as well. In terms of developments going on, Blacktown's going to be is going through some massive overhauls. Check the council website. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, and you can see what comes along with that. Some of the things I was saying before. So population growth, crime rates reducing, and then obviously that all results in property prices growing as well. In terms of some of the things that are going on, this is all on the council website, but you can actually see what their plan is for the city itself, and a lot of the upgrades and things that they're doing. There's a lot going on. It's pretty exciting, especially if you live there or have a property there or looking to buy a property there. These are all massive projects, and it's a lot of money that's being spent. The Liberal government has announced a lot of funding for Western Sydney as well. They are keen to invest, whether that's to buy votes from people locally or not. That doesn't really matter. It's the fact is that there's a lot going on from an investment standpoint as well. So good to check it out. Mount Druitt itself as well, they've got a massive $1 billion development going on there as well. It's going to be pretty good for not just for employment, but it's going to improve the amenities and just make it a better sort of place to live in general. So here's a list of some of the things that they're working on at the moment, which is pretty cool. This is an interesting one. So this is talking about the crime rate because this is probably one of the questions a lot of people ask when they're buying in an area like Blackett that probably doesn't have the best rap. You can see that the crime rate is higher than average. So there is more crime generally in the area. But if you do look at areas with high crime rates, one of the highest crime rates is in Surrey Hills and kind of around that CBD or just south of Sydney CBD. And it's actually got a higher crime rate than Blacktown. So this is important because it shows you who your neighbours are going to be, and if you've any bars on the window, I suppose. But it's probably not really trending up or down if you look kind of over the last few years. But yes, definitely, it is definitely higher than other parts of Sydney. So that's pretty much it, guys. I'd love to hear some feedback. Let me know what your thoughts were. If you've got any suburbs that you'd like me to check out for you as well, please. I'd love to do another one of these very soon. We've got one in mind that we want to go with, but any requests we're happy to hear. And if there's any data or anything that you'd like us to include in these, please let us know. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed.